Hey, what's going on everyone? We have the TFT patch notes or patch 14.21. This one's going to be on the smaller end. They're holding the world championships right now. A lot of weird stuff going on there. A bunch of players getting banned, which I honestly think is pretty funny. But we are here for the patch notes. In the buffs, we have Honeymancy, Eldritch, Frost, Warwick, Nyla, Syndra, Ahri, Jinx, and Balance Budget Plus. Then for the nerfs, we have Rumble, Shyvana, Rakan, and 6 augments. I talked a little bit about Shyvana in the recent meta snapshot, as I post a video on every Friday, but it's also always available on the website bunnymuffins.lol/meta. A lot of people were running shapeshifters and using Shyvana as the very strong early to mid game before you get to the Smolders and Briars of the world. Adjusted, they're going to be adjusting Arcana and Chrono, so let's see what all this stuff is about. We have the rotating shop up front, but let's move on into the system changes. Portals. Treasure Golems portal has been disabled. Rest in peace to Treasure Golems. The reason why is because it was the least popular portal, which is odd. I actually kind of like this one. I'm with Riot Prism here. This wasn't my favorite portal, but I thought it was a decent portal, but no one seemed to pick it except for me. I didn't understand why extra items would be bad, you know, but they're removing it because very unpopular, but hopefully we'll see something similar to it in the future. Onto large changes, we have the traits. Tahm Kench is going to get some HP changes for the Arcana buff. It's going to stay the same at 2 and 3 Arcana. At 4 Arcana, it's going to get nerfed, and 5, the same thing. Xerath True Damage, this one's going to get buffed at 3 Arcana, and that's going to be it. So most people default to Tahm Kench. He already got nerfed before, but I think this nerf right here solidifies forcing you to make an actual decision between changing your Arcanas. Ideally, it's in a state where it's no longer you look at a guide and whatever they tell you to put there is what you should put. Maybe we have to adapt it to our team every single game or even every single round. I think that's the Riot dream right there. Whether it achieved it or not, we'll have to see. Most people have not been picking Xerath too much. It's mainly been the Tahm Kench. Onto Chrono, they have the heal percent 20% to 15%, Chrono 4 AP 45 to 55. No one really plays 4 Chrono, but it helps you get to 6 Chrono more easily, so I'm guessing they don't want just splashing 2 Chrono, having insane heals, but then leaving 6 Chrono or 4 Chrono out to dry. Eldritch 5 spell duration 4 to 8 seconds, 7 spell bonus attack speed is going to be buffed up from 40 to 60%, and then onto the Frost AD and AP 16, 35, 50, and 90. They're buffing it in the 2 middle stages, so 5 and 7 Frost. That's by far when Frost is the weakest. Vertical Frost comps in the last patch were pretty awful. We check out the trait stats. We have 9 Frost. Of course, it's going to be averaging a 3+ because you need 2 spatulas for it. 3 Frost, pretty good because it's just a random trait in a different comp. And then 5 and 7. When your Frost 7 is at a 4.87, that's not a good feeling. And I'm honestly surprised 5 Frost is this high. But they're buffing both of those, which is very welcome. Honeymancer damage dealt percentage is going to be 6, 11, and 18%. And all of this is going to be raised to 7, 13, 20. Honeymancer damage received percent is going to be increased from 3, 4, 8 to 3, 5, 10. Again, if we look at Honeymancer, I think was the worst trait in the last patch. Like 5 Honeys, 4.7. No, Frost was worse in terms of the deep Frost versus deep Honeymancy, but both pretty bad. The buffs definitely are well received. Units tier 1, multi-striker reroll could use a real weapon, but instead we're giving the comp a defensive lift with a buff to 1-cost tank that hasn't seen success since our early patches. That's going to be the Jax defense gain 60, 75, 90 to 75, 90, 110. That's a pretty sizable buff. And right now, I know a lot of players, they use my meta snapshot or they use the data site teamfight.lol, but most people would already know from my videos that if you look at 1-cost units and 3-star average placements, in like Master Plus, like yeah, most 1-cost reroll doesn't do that well apart from like whatever the strongest one is, which right now is the Soraka Seraphine comp. But if we look at Jax at 4.42, Ashe 4.6, and we drop it down to like Platinum and remove these other ones, you can see already that Jax improves to a 4.13. Ashe is at a 4.11. So in lower rating, these comps were already good, so they're going to be even better. So if you are like below diamond, just force multi-striker, Jax, Ashe reroll every game. You'll probably climb a decent amount. But if you're like Master Plus, this comp did get a little bit better. So maybe you could pick more spots to play it in. Warwick bonus damage 60 to 70 AD. Warwick healing 18, 20, and 30 is going to be changed to 20, 25, and 30. This is a compensation buff for Warwick because they are removing his best item, which was Corrupted Vampiric Scepter. He is semi-playable without it. You have to have like a huge spot for him, but It definitely was possible before, and hopefully it still is possible now. Units tier 2, Ahri primary orb damage is going to be 220, 330, 500, buffed up to 230, 345, and 520. Ahri reroll hasn't seen much daylight. I wonder what comps are going to be good around that. Is it going to be the old Ahri comp with like some Scholar, some Arcana? Probably would be. You want to focus on like all your 3-star units, obviously, because Ahri's Arcana bonus loves having a ton of 3 stars. Foxfire true damage is going to be buffed up a little bit as well. Nyla AD 50 to 55. Rumble mana 20 out of 60 being changed to 30 out of 70. He was used in a bunch of the Sugarcraft comps. The Mage comp used him. Anything that uses Vanguard, he's good to pair with. And if Blaster's ever good, obviously he's going to be used as well. He's just like a triple trait unit, Vanguard, Sugarcraft, Blaster. So he's just a little too versatile right now. He's averaging like a 4.39 right now in Master Plus. Nothing crazy good, but as a 2 cost, that is pretty good. While this might not seem crazy good for a 2 cost unit, this is pretty good. Typically for 2 cost units, they're going to be in like the 4.5 range. On average, that is. So it was slightly strong, but the play rate was pretty high. Oddly enough, Zillion's is even better, both in terms of average placement and play rate. So I guess Riot just hates Yordles. Shyvana HP 750 to 700. This is much bigger than it seems. You might notice like some nerfs, you're like, oh, Nyla 50, 80 to 55. It's sizable, but it's nothing too crazy, right? But Shyvana 750 to 700, this seems even smaller, right? Because ratio-wise, it is smaller. But considering she's a shapeshifter and shapeshifters scale off of HP, it looks much bigger than it is. Let's actually read their description on this one. With Shapeshifter, Shyvana is too tanky for the damage output she can provide, and with the right AP hybrid items, that damage is all too consistent. Yeah, I was talking about this in my meta snapshot before. Shyvana, she was being used in a lot of shapeshifter comps, and she was used as fast 9 sometimes, not all the time, but people slammed like the Briar items on her, like BT, Titans, or something like that, and sometimes they even throw AP items on her just to get a strong early game, and then they just like sack the item later, and they just kept her at 2-star. That's what a lot of top players were doing, and it just made the shapeshifter very, very strong until they got the legendaries, which was like the biggest power spike in the world. So she was like the perfect mid-game unit that you could kind of use. Syndra 30 plus bonus cast damage, 30% to 35%. This is probably the final buff they are going to give to Syndra. She's on the cusp before her last buff, and even now she's probably playable, but this should be enough to get her in there, even though it's really, really small. Actually, I bet this doesn't even change her placements all that much. Pretty much they just can't over buff her because the risk that she becomes OP again is too much. So if you look at it from like the game balance team's perspective, they could either buff her very slowly over like the whole set, which is pretty much what they've done, and she hasn't been played much at all. Or they could try to do like the real buff, which they think could get her there in the second week, over buff her, and then people get mad. That's the trade-off there. But let me know, did they do the right decision by slowly buffing her? Should they have been more aggressive? I think they could have been like a little bit more aggressive. Not necessarily now, but maybe 2 or 3 patches ago, because she was pretty garbage right after her first nerfs. Jinx AD 52 to 55. Wait a minute, why are they buffing Jinx? Jinx's go-to comp is getting a few nerfs to its power ceiling, things like augments. Oh, okay, so some augments are getting nerfed. 6 Hunter is getting nerfed, so they're buffing her to compensate for that. Okay, yeah, that's perfectly fine. Let's read the other ones first before we make judgments. Katarina 2 nearest enemy bonus is going to be buffed up from 155% to 165%. Pretty small buff there. Units tier 4, Rakan shield power, 20% max HP, plus 180, 200, 1000 is going to be changed to 18% max HP, 160, 180, 1000. Pretty sizable Rakan nerf, but he was one of the most popular units, if not the most popular. I think this is perfectly fair. Too many Preserver players out there, like, so that the teams that really relied on him weren't quite really able to use him. Maybe that's why they didn't nerf Zillion that we looked at before, because they're going to be nerfing Rakan, which is a Preserver unit. Augments, balanced budget, gold per turn 9 to 10. That's really good. That's a big change. I want to compare this to Explosive Growth Plus, which gives 11 XP over the next 4 rounds. Balanced budget gives plus 10 over the next 4 rounds. Yeah, that's pretty fair, right? Because with gold, you could use it to either gain interest or use it to reroll, whereas Explosive Growth, you have to use it for XP. And that's kind of what I was getting at in the earlier part of the video. Balanced budget can never be like the best augment to choose. The reason why is because when you take an econ augment, you either want something that gives XP or rerolls, right? And if you have a dedicated XP augment, such as the Explosive Growth over here, it by default has to be better than Balanced Budget, the one that gives gold, right? Because gold is flexible. On the flip side, something that gives rerolls also has to be much better for rerolling a comp than the gold augment. same reason applies. You can only use a reroll augment to do reroll stuff, whereas the gold is flexible. So to fully utilize balanced budget, you have to be like a little smarter, a little more adaptive, but sometimes you just have to take it if you need any econ augment. Category 5 AD percent is going to be changed from 90% to 85. Cauterized Pyro no longer appears on 2-1. Why did they remove that? Did they talk about it here? They're trait link augments that skew towards higher unit compositions, making them exceptionally weak early game. They're performing fine as a second or third augment, so we're just going to disable them on 2-1. The odd thing about this is that Cauterized, it gives like Shen and Akali. So I know that they are expensive, don't get me wrong, having like a 2 cost, 3 cost, and 2 4 cost units in a trait. It is very expensive, but I thought since they give a Shen and Akali, like that's 5 gold, right? So I thought that might be able to compensate for it, but obviously it's not enough. Combat Caster, shield duration, 4 seconds to 3 seconds. I really think Combat Caster is only good because the mages are good right now. So if you nerf mages, then it's not going to be as good. Same with like Karma comps. Fast forward, Chrono doesn't appear on 2-1. Hunting Frenzy, Hunter base AS 10% to 5%. Learning the spell, base AP 18% to 12%. Again, if Seraphine and Soraka weren't so good, are you telling me they're not nerfing Seraphine or Soraka and they're just going to nerf the augments that pretty much only work for those comps instead? Because like Syndra could use this, right? But no one plays Syndra, and now that this is nerfed, like do you even want it on Syndra? I don't really know. I think you really just want this in like the Seraphine comp last patch. So I feel like they should have just nerfed the other comp instead of nerfing this augment, but I'm sure they have their reasons. Little Buddies, AS per buddy 9 to 7. Royal Guard, Fairy Healing 4 to 3. Assassin's Toolbox disabled. Support Golem disabled. These kind of sucked. Like the Assassin Toolbox items, that was like the Prowler's Claw, and I forget what the other one is, but they're like the Ornn items that are like the most difficult to use. If you compare it to Spellcaster's Toolbox, which is Zonia's and Manazane, it's much easier to use. Trinity Force 1 is much easier to use, etc, etc. So they might need to reapproach this in the future sets. Support Golem 2 has been disabled because it sucked. The nerfs to it were way too big. If we look at Support Golem 2, it's a 4.9 right now, and before the nerfs it was at a 4.04, so that's pretty funny. There's not really a good in-between for this augment. Artifact items, Corrupt Vampiric Scepter has been disabled. Mogul's Mail, HP per stack 5 to 7. Didn't I say before they over-nerfed this item? So they're buffing it back up. I'm glad that that happened. I'm glad I was right also. Zonia's Paradox, 45 to 40 AP. And then onto support items, Unstable Treasure Chest, items granted, 3 to 4. Wait, what? That is really, really good. So apparently it was only good because of the golems that got it, but now since they're removing the treasure golem thing, they can just buff it because it's the worst support item. I'm pretty sure all support items are just good though. Zephyr team attack speed is being changed from 8% to 2%, and then let's move on to the small changes. Blaster 4 damage amp is going to be buffed up from 60 to 65. Hunter 6 7110 to 65100. Yeah, the Jinx comp was one of the best comps. It was in my S tiers recently. Mage 7, another S tier comp, 115 to 110. Okay, so they are nerfing it. Fair enough. I feel like they should nerf the 1 cost units a tiny bit. I don't see any changes down here for them though. But we have Scholar 6-piece healing 15% to 10%. This was another auto win. I'm glad that they are nerfing a lot of the auto wins. Those were a little annoying to deal with. Units Akali dash damage 260 to 280. She's kind of been forgotten about in the middle part of the set. Maybe this is enough to make her come back. Nyla and Akali did get buffs and they love being played together in certain comps. Tristana AD spell percent 340 to 360. Bard ability damage being dropped down just a tad. Swain mana being buffed up by 10 max mana. That's going to be helping Frost out a lot also. You know what? I'm really happy about the shapeshifter changes. They nerfed the parts that were too strong about it, and then they buffed the shapeshifter that's good in a different comp. And I don't think it's going to make shapeshifter like out of hand or anything either, because I do think Frost definitely does need some love. Augment's raid boss Bastion tooltip changed to match the functionality when other Bastions die is being changed to when other units die. I did not know this. I thought it was just Bastions. Wow, that's crazy. And then we're going to move on into the bug fixes. So discombobulated Lucky Gloves now works correctly after polymorphing or recombobulating a unit. Always Lucky Gloves now updates any existing Thieves Gloves you have the round you take the augment. Yeah, I noticed that this didn't work. Stacking multiple Hands of Justice now grants the correct amount of Omnivamp. The Draconic Mastery augment will now still grant bonus stats to dragons without the dragon trait active. Too chaotic, the Call to Chaos tooltip will now correctly show that it gave 5 random emblems instead of 4. Unstable treasure chest tooltip has been updated to match its new targeting logic. And then don't care about the Donna revival stuff. OP finisher, fix a bug where the Katarina finisher visuals would spill over into other players' finishers when they happen at the same time. Fix a bug with Golden Tiger Market with screen tearing. And then the win streak VFX for Le Bonbon Bunny Bistro no longer occasionally has a tactician phase into a transparent ghost version of themselves temporarily. I actually experienced this. I noticed that my tactician disappears and I got confused. But if you go to a different board then come back, then it kind of fixed it. But let's go up back to the summary. Let's see how this is going to probably change things. The Mage reroll comp's still going to be good. In the S tiers right now, Mage got nerfed. Portal Rise not really touched too much. Rise Flex, 6 Scholar got nerfed, so the home run isn't as strong anymore. Fairy Callista, Rakan got nerfed. Jinx Wukong, Jinx got nerfed a bunch. Same with Spin to Win. So all the good comps did get hit, and I wonder if there are going to be any Ahri comps being cooked up. I don't think Syndra is going to be that dominant. Maybe it's going to be played every now and then, like how it is now, but it's looking like to be a very similar patch to last patch. Minor changes here. Normally, if a patch happens for like a while, like sometimes we have like a 3-week patch, metas do develop and like counters to the best comps do come up, as well as new innovations. Like I've seen it before. A lot of people don't believe me when I say this, but it's been true since like set 1, whenever there's like a really long patch or like repeat patches. So we just have to keep a lookout to see on what's popping up. I like doing data checks for that personally. You often see things just like climb up really high for some reason on random days. But that's going to be pretty much it for this patch review over here. It's a bit of a quick one because it was much shorter. But I hope to see you all on Friday for the tier list update. That's going to be it for me today. I hope to see you all next time.